Lesson 14, Queuing a series of state updates. 1. Introduction. When we change a state variable in React, it queues a new render. But sometimes we may want to perform several operations on that value before React goes ahead and re-renders the component. To understand how this works, we need to know what batching means in React. 2. React batches state updates. Imagine you have a button that should increase a number by 3 when clicked. You might expect that calling the state setter 3 times in a row will immediately add 3. However, React doesn't behave that way. Each render in React is independent, and the state values inside that render are fixed. This means that even if you call the state setter several times in the same event handler, React still refers to the same value from that particular render. In addition to this, React does not process each update immediately. Instead, it waits until all the code in your event handler finishes running. Only after the event handler completes does React process all queued state updates and trigger a re-render. Think of it like ordering food at a restaurant. The waiter doesn't run to the kitchen after every single dish you mention. Instead, they wait for you to finish your order, take note of everything, and only then deliver the final order to the kitchen. This system lets React handle multiple updates efficiently, even across multiple components, without causing unnecessary re-renders. It makes the app faster and ensures that we never end up with partially updated user interfaces. However, React doesn't batch updates across different intentional user actions. Each separate click, for example, is processed independently. This behavior ensures that interactions remain predictable. If the first click disables a button, the next click won't act as if it was still enabled. 3. Updating the same state multiple times before the next render. Sometimes, we do want to update the same state variable several times before React re-renders. Instead of passing a new value directly, we can pass a function that receives the previous state and calculates the next one. When you do this, you're not telling React what the new value should be immediately. Instead, you're telling it how to compute the new value based on the most recent one. React collects these updater functions into a queue and processes them all together after the event handler finishes. During the next render, it goes through the queue one by one. Each function receives the latest value and returns a new one, until React arrives at the final state. This is why using the functional form ensures that each update builds upon the previous one, rather than being stuck with an outdated value from the first render. 4. What happens if you update state after replacing it? Now, suppose you first replace the state with a fixed number, and then immediately update it again using an updater function. In this case, React first queues an instruction to replace the value with that fixed number, and then it queues the updater function. When React processes the queue, it applies the replacement first, which sets the state to the new number, and then it runs the updater function, which modifies that value further. The end result reflects both steps, the replacement followed by the update. 5. What happens if you replace state after updating it? In another case, you might update the state using an updater function and then replace it with a fixed value afterward. Here, React first queues the update, then the replacement. When React processes this queue, it first applies the update function to calculate a new value, but then it replaces that result entirely with the fixed number that came afterward. The final result, therefore, is whatever value you specified in the replacement. To summarize this behavior, when you pass an updater function, React adds it to the queue to be calculated later. When you pass a plain value, React adds a replace with this value instruction, effectively overriding anything that came before it. After all of this, React triggers a re-render and processes the queue in order. It's important to remember that updater functions run during rendering, so they must be pure. They can't have side effects or call other state setters. In development, React might run these functions twice, without keeping the second result, to help detect errors. 6. Naming conventions. Developers often name the argument inside the updater function using the first letters of the state variable. For example, if your state variable is called enabled, you might name the parameter e. Others prefer longer, more descriptive names like previous enabled. Both conventions are perfectly fine. It's a matter of style. 7. Recap. Let's wrap this up. Setting a state variable doesn't change its value within the same render. It simply schedules a new one. React waits until after the event handler completes to process all state updates. This is batching. When you need to update the same piece of state multiple times before the next render, use the functional updater form. Batching and updater functions are two key mechanisms that make React efficient, predictable, and consistent in how it manages state and rendering.